You're tuning into the O&P Check-in, an SPS podcast. I'm Brendan Erickson, a regional sales manager at SPS. This show brings you the latest happenings in the O&P industry. We're unlocking trends and news from this tight-knit orthotics and prosthetics community. Co-hosting with me today is SPS Sales Account Manager, Stephen Hunter.
Hey everyone, glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Let's get started.
From everyday walking to navigating uneven, rough terrain, the Seattle Scride adapts to your patient's everyday situations. The Seattle Scride offers adjustable stiffness of the vertical spring, up to 15 millimeters of vertical travel, and 28-degree overall axial rotation. Designed by an amputee with the amputee in mind, backed by a 3-year warranty, and PDAC approved for L5987 and L5984. Try the Seattle Scride on your next K3 or K4 patient and help them to return to a happy, healthy, and active lifestyle. Contact your SPS Sales Account Manager today to learn more or follow the link in our show notes.
Elevate your expertise at our free in-person SPS Clinical Education Days. Join the SPS Clinical Services team alongside industry leaders from ALPS, Click Medical, PhilHour, Integrum, O&P Insight, and Willowwood for an engaging day of learning and professional development. This year, we are excited to introduce our new dual track program with different cities offering either track 1 or track 2. This gives you the flexibility to choose the location and curriculum that matches your interests. Whether you attend one event or experience both tracks, you will discover innovative solutions to enhance your clinic workflow and transform patient outcomes. Follow the link in our show notes for more info. Hello, listeners. Today we are chatting with Jessica Norrell, prosthetist, orthotist, and owner of MOZN Solutions. Welcome, Jessica. We're really excited to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here today.
And welcome back.
Yeah, right? It's been a while.
It has. And, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. And how about you just kick us off by sharing a little bit about yourself and your journey into O&P?
Sure. Thank you for that. So, my journey in O&P began about, I keep saying 20 years, but I think it's 22 at this point. Nobody's counting but me. Began in a small, independent practice, cleaning the plaster trap, cleaning the shop, stocking our quote-unquote leg room, and grew from there to become a resident clinician. Really enjoyed the business aspect of O&P. I mean, I love the patient care. I don't think anybody becomes a clinician not loving the patient care side. But when I began my journey, it was, right around Medicare kind of increasing their regulations, requiring more documentation, and really watching that take a toll on the business and how businesses had to shift. I became really interested in helping O&P practices, operationalize their business, which kind of leads me to where I'm at today with MOZN Solutions. We started MOZN Solutions 5 years ago to help be an operational arm for O&P practices that needed help with anything from process improvement, business optimizations, to what we're talking about today, which is insurance contracting and renegotiations. And if you had asked me, not even 5 years ago, but when I started my journey in O&P, if I'd be the one talking about insurance contracting and renegotiations, that was not on my bingo card at all, ever. I'm still shocked that I get to talk about this because it's interesting to me that it's something so new for our profession when it's something that it's what you start with in your business, right? And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Just insurance contracting and renegotiations is a profession problem, right? It is not a one practice problem. It is everybody, whether you're a large scale business or a small scale business, we all face these same challenges. And so I'm looking forward to discussing those things with you guys today.
Cool. So let's dive into the topic of insurance contracting then. I know I'm not the most full versed on this topic and some of our listeners might not be either. So could you give us like a background on the current landscape?
Sure. I'll kick it off with kind of how we got started in it, right? So 2 years into MOZN, the Washington State Association, the Orthotics and Prosthetics State Associations said, "Hey, Jess, you want to help us with the contracting project?" And I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing in that space. Like, I've never done one. So if you want to take a chance on me, I'm happy to help. And so they said, so the State Association of Washington holds a group NPI. They all have their individual businesses, but the O&P Association also holds a group MPI. And so they said, we have this individual contract. We want to work with you because obviously we can't talk about this contract with each other. So you can review our contracts and help us decide if we go at it individually or not. And so through that, they said, not only do we want to negotiate, but we want to do it with data. Like we've tried just going to the payer and saying, hey, we need more money. We need to move our contract. How do we do it through data? And so that kind of began my journey of just understanding, to your question, like where did O&P start with all of this, right? And really just starting with contracts in O&P. When you start your business, you get a contract and you're just so happy, honestly, to have that contract, to be in network with the payer. You file it away, you put the fee schedule in your EMR, and you move forward, right? And so what we've come to realize is that everybody, mostly in O&P, has filed those contracts away and not realized that that was something they needed to look at year after year after year, or maybe it's every 3 years, depending on the contract length and the terms. And so what we're helping to do is educate folks on just like, one, centralizing those contracts, knowing where you stand with your payers, the last time you renegotiated them, and then what movement you can make with those. So like with anything in life, any contract you sign, they're renegotiable if it's a continuous relationship you have with those folks, and you need to constantly evaluate them.
Gotcha. And when you're jumping into, I guess, this whole realm and insurance in general, what are some of the headwinds that people are facing today and maybe in the past as well, just to give us some context?
Yeah, I think the first one is, and this is something we all know and love, is that we are a small profession. At the end of the day, we are a small subset of the healthcare profession. And so we are facing issues with just being so small that we don't get a lot of recognition. And it's funny, I was at a conference this week, but we were at the table with a payer for one of our clients, and the payer had the contract with her, and we did as well. And she said, guys, this was negotiated in 2013. Why did you wait so long to approach us? Like, we're not going to come to you and say, hey, we want to give you more money. Why did you wait so long? And, and I think we've heard that time and time again. Like, the payer is not going to go, hey, O&P practice, like, let's work on negotiating your contract. So one of the things is like, we've just sat on them for so long. So trying to get to current Medicare is a very big uphill battle. We're small in the healthcare sector. And then we're one of the few professions that have negotiated rates below Medicare. Most of them are at or above Medicare. When you're talking about physicians or hospitals, etc., their rates are far above Medicare. So we have a long way to go in just not only, showing who we are, our worth, and those kind of things, but just advancing our contracts in general.
How did that happen to our industry?
Man, that's a good question that I wish I knew the answer to. My assumption is, I think it goes back to, our overhead and our margins are so small as is. We don't have like the staffing that hospitals have, or even physician groups, where we have a dedicated ops person. Until we're a certain scale, like having a dedicated ops person to go after those contracts is really unobtainable for like the smaller to mid-sized practices. So we worked with what we had, right? We had the contract, we were getting paid. We just rolled with what we had. And honestly, I don't fault anybody for it. But when you look at the different aspects of your business where you can kind of squeeze things from, it's like you can only squeeze certain things on your G&A side, right? Like you can't hold back salaries. You can only squeeze certain things on the cost of materials. So then it's like, where do you add value? And I think as a profession, we've looked at it from kind of the wrong lens of like, let's squeeze in these areas instead of how do we start to maximize other areas?
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. Now that we know this should be a focus or maybe a problem if someone hasn't looked back in years or decades, what are some like proactive steps that clinics could take to get the most out of their insurance contracts? Like, where do you start with all this?
I love that question. Whether, somebody works with us or not, the very first thing we do with anybody is we create what we call like a contract management system. So centralize all your contracts, get them out of the filing cabinets or somebody's email or shared, like wherever it may be. Create a shared folder where they're all online and they're shared with the appropriate people on your team. And then honestly use something like Excel, something very basic where You list every payer that you have a contract with or every payer that you work with, because you might have some out-of-network contract benefits. The last time you negotiated that contract, what year of Medicare it's on or what fee schedule it's based off of, what percentage it's at. And if you have a rep or somebody in that contract that you've worked with, list them on there. And know your termination clauses. There's a very large national payer out there who likes to reference the termination clause as soon as you ask for a renegotiation. So I recommend knowing like when your termination is up, and you really only need to know that like if you're going to terminate that contract for any reason, but know it from a legal perspective of you can negotiate your contract at any point. The termination clause is only if you want to terminate it. And let me throw one caveat in there is you can negotiate it at any point unless you've got like term length on your contract, right? There are several payers out there who want to do like a 3-year contract and have a sliding scale. So you don't have to worry about negotiating it over the 3 years. So know again, like if it's a 3-year contract, a 1-year contract, does it auto renew, those kind of things. And if you have prevailing Medicare written in those contracts, then leave them alone. Unless it's prevailing Medicare at like 65% of Medicare, then you may want to go after that one. That's where you want to start, is just understanding where your contracts stand. I'd say the next step to that is understanding the impact on your business, right? So we'll take a random payer, for example. You may have a really poor contract with that payer, but it's 5% of your sales. So maybe that's not one you want to spend a lot of time on, you know, and there might be another payer that is maybe 80% of Medicare, but it's over 45% of your sales. And it's like, man, if I just got 5% more on this, or I moved it to current Medicare, or I got a carve out for cranial remoldings because those don't stay up to date as well in our contracts, that would have a good impact on my business.
Prioritizing the largest and the most important, and maybe then the oldest as the second step for that.
Correct.
Yeah. And I mean, you talked a little bit about data before, and it sounds like just organizing the base data for yourself is great. What role does data and reporting play in, I guess, strengthening your negotiation when you actually do get to the table?
To me, it plays a lot. So our presentation to the payers is a partnership or partnering with the payer. And we truly mean that. Like when you go to the payer and you sit down with your negotiator, like they're getting asked for rate increases from everybody across the board. But what we found that they're not getting asked is, what can we do on our end to help make your job easier, or the person who's getting our claims easier? Like, is there something you guys are seeing on your end that we could help with? So one of the first things we do is, and honestly, to kind of disarm the conversation, is just how can we also help you? And so then we lead them on the data journey that we've created. And again, I want to give a lot of credit to the State Association of Washington for this, because it was kind of the brainchild that came out of that project. So one of the things they wanted to do when they approached the payer was, let's talk about how much time we spend with a patient, because our fee schedules in general are lumped in with DME and kind of the overall healthcare space, right? And so DME is a one and done type of situation. You might even be able to get some things from Amazon. So it's a very transactional thing where we know O&P is not, custom side especially. And so what we've done is we will pull reports from everybody's EMR systems. And what we're looking at is how much time per billable event is spent with patients on average. And so we can tell, you know, for a transtibial replacement socket that on average 5 to 7 hours of just clinic time is spent with that patient. So when we approach the payer, we'll say, hey, you know, when we spend 5 to 7 hours with this patient and we add on our cost of materials and we add on our overhead, which we have to account for, right? Our admin, our billing, our rent, our utilities, etc. When you pay at this rate, this is our margin or lack thereof. And the last 3 conversations we've had with payers just in the last like month and a half alone, every payer has said, please send those slides to me so I can go back to my manager to show them what this fee schedule is doing for you guys or not doing for you guys. So it is making an impact to break it down and show them. We also talk to the payers about how we're different from DME just from a professional standpoint, right? You know, in O&P, we have master's degree level clinicians. We have 2 years of residency. We have accredited businesses. We have professional standards we meet. For DME, they have to have a high school diploma, 3 years of work experience, and business accreditation. And so again, we're trying to, just through the conversations, again, there's nothing wrong with being a DME provider or anything like that, but I do think it leads to some of the bias on our fee schedules and what we provide. And so just separating the time and the expertise of who is doing what and when really helps to have that open dialogue with that payer and helps them to understand our fee schedule and helps them to see, like, when they get that big claim at the end, the time, materials, and what was involved in all of that.
And I mean, you mentioned that as a data point, almost a dollars per hour metric. Do you think most of the O&P clinics out there know those numbers, or is it something that you need to teach them to do on a consistent basis?
It's something we are teaching. So, I don't know if anybody has sat down and done the dollars per hour analysis. We do it very high level. Like, we'll take a salary and kind of apply it to our general math of what we're doing. So I do think it's important as you're going through, because then as new payers come into your network, you know what contracts are going to be beneficial for your business or not, right? Not only from a dollars per hour standpoint, but you have to evaluate the contract in certain ways, right? If that payer is increasing and there's patients you really want to serve in that network, absolutely look at it from that perspective as well. But you have to have the business side and the patient care side and weigh both of those factors.
Wow. I know I've spoken with some people and they may decide not to take a contract, or they may decide not to even do an entire category within O&P. Are you seeing that trend happening more, that people are aware of it and they're just saying, hey, look, I can't spend X amount of hours on a single pair of shoes that maybe is going to get returned, and then I got to do it again and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I see both sides, right? So we see the side of where out-of-network benefits or out-of-network contracts with payers are better than being in network. And so the flip side to that is you have to weigh your admin time with that, because there's going to be more admin time when you're working on out-of-network contracts. You have to send more information up front. But if that risk is worth the reward, then I would advise it. We had a client who came to us, we ran the data for them, and there was one payer they were out of network with, but they were getting like 20% more than what they would have gotten in network with that payer. It was like, with your volume and what you're already collecting, it doesn't make sense to try and get network with them. And so they chose to stay out of network and work it that way. The flip side to that is let's take the diabetic shoes insert for this example here. I'm in Richmond, Virginia here. If I'm the only diabetic shoe provider in Richmond, Virginia, and I want to get a contract with a payer that I've had a hard time getting with them, I might play that angle because I know I'm going to get other lines of business on the other side of it and just say, hey, can you do a one-time out-of-network or in-network contract with me? Because I am the only provider doing this specialty service, whether it's diabetic shoes or maybe you're big on cranial remolding. It's interesting to kind of watch practices do both sides of the coin there. We do recommend knowing how unique you are to your area, right? Are you the only one that services a certain range? Are you within a 45-mile range or area where that's not serviced? Do you have mobile services that help kind of the rural areas, or diabetic shoes and inserts that nobody else is doing? So knowing your kind of unique competitive advantage is also helpful if you're trying to get in network or even just renegotiate certain carve-outs.
So you did mention that the state association came to you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but were the practitioners not able to talk about this together due to some sort of collusion, or how did that come apart? And what can our listeners do to make sure that they're not entering muddy waters of collusion?
I love that question. So on my presentation, I have a group NPI slide, and the very second bullet is lawyer up. I highly recommend, if you are going about a group contract, that you get the counsel of a lawyer just to avoid that environment, right? The one thing you don't want to do is say, hey, if we don't get a contract or we don't get this rate, that we're going to band together and we're all going to drop out. You absolutely cannot do those things. So for NIPOP, we did get a lawyer to help us out and just to be a part of the conversations. But because I was the person gathering the data, reviewing the contracts, not one of them, said their contracted rate, not one of them talked about their data. I was that central person to kind of keep everything funneled to one single source of truth so that they didn't share. When it got to the negotiation level where they were talking as a group and that payer knew it was a group contract that they were going after, they could, of course, then talk as a group about the rate because it was to the group and not individually. So my advice would always be to seek counsel. And in 2022, the government created an act called the Transparency and Coverage Act. So So payers are now required to post and provide contracted rates for all providers of every fee schedule. So I can go to Blue Cross Blue Shield, for instance, their website, or UHC, Aetna, etc., and go search Richmond, Virginia, or Virginia as a whole. And it was meant for the consumer, right? But I can go find the fee schedules for all of Virginia for our whole DME post fee schedule. So the fee schedules are now allowed to be discussed. You could technically discuss those because it is public information at this point. Everybody has access to it. Now, the fun part about it is the access is really, really limited. Like, I could go to that website, I can go download the file, and it's going to crash my computer because I don't have the tools in the system to read it. So there are companies out there who are providing this data for a fee so that you can have the access you need. I like pulling that information from a knowledge perspective, right? We had a client in Virginia ask us to go after a fee schedule for them. And I know this specific payer generally in some states has market fee schedules, or sometimes will negotiate with independents, right? Or one-offs here and there. In Virginia, it's a market fee schedule. And so I basically said, hey, unless Virginia goes after it, like you guys want to move it together, they're not going to do the one-offs because everybody in Virginia has the same rate for this fee schedule. And so it's helping us make decisions on how to approach payers as well if you see things like that in your state. But again, to kind of come back to this, you never want to collude in a way that's going to hurt the patient, the market, or the payer. You have to protect your business in those. And if you have any questions about where the line is drawn, it is recommended to get a lawyer involved.
Great advice. I know that I've had some of our customers reach out and ask about, how to deal with the new kind of Medicaid schedule in different states and how those are getting into managed care and also like IPAs and whatnot. And is there any way you could summarize what's going on there?
I can kind of speak to the Medicare Advantage side of this. So the Medicare Advantage plans that we are seeing coming out, which are just, commercial plans that are offshoot of the Medicare Advantage things, those are also negotiable. You don't have to accept if you get a letter saying, at this rate, this is what's coming out. You don't have to accept it. You can certainly respond to that letter and say, hey, I can't accept it for these reasons, and, list out your reasons, what you do in your area, respond back to those letters. I think that's the other issue is the payers will do these unilateral amendments, right? And say, hey, this is what's happening. And we just accept them, right? And we don't respond back to them. We don't prove our value to the profession. So respond back to those letters.
If they are going to respond, where do they start? Or should they contact you? Would that be a good place to start?
I mean, they can absolutely contact me, but I would say, take a look at your previous fee schedules, know which ones are working for you, and go back with the rate that helps keep your business sustainable. We honestly ask every payer for 100% of current Medicare. Do we get that every time? No. But we are trying to move the needle on at least knowing like, hey, we're going to continue to ask for this. So at some point, this is where we want to be. So like any negotiation, know where you want to get to, aim high for the first couple of rounds until you can kind of get back to where you want to be.
How big does persistence and determination roll into this? I'm sure you get told no a ton of times, right? And you got to...
Yeah.
Got to deal with that.
The number of no's we get it's a lot, but it to your point, it is persistence. And I think that's kind of why we founded or created this model in our business, was because the first no is just like the first layer of an onion to us. And you just keep digging in and you keep digging in and you figure out what the yes is. So any client that starts to work with us, we start with like that contract management piece. And then what's the overall strategy when we go to one payer, and where do you want to land? Like what's best case scenario, so that we know as we're conversing back and forth with them where we want to be with that payer.
That's good to know, because I'm sure a bunch of people get told no and maybe feel defeated or they don't have enough time to continue on. But just the knowledge that if you are persistent, you're one step closer.
Not knowing a lot about contracting and negotiating everything, like being told no, I would probably be hesitant to be persistent and push. First thought would be like losing that contract to someone else, but knowing that you can be persistent and push for what you need as a business and that is successful, that's good to know.
From our experience, I'm going to knock on wood, we have not had one payer because we asked to look at our contracts have a no. Another thing we have to realize too is every other healthcare profession is doing this yearly. Like they're going to the payers yearly. They are talking to them yearly. They're not getting their contracts denied because they're asking for an increase. This is a very normal and standard practice of doing business in every aspect. I think in O&P, we get nervous just because it is so small. And, there are some payers out there who basically say like, oh, we have 2 in the network in your area, we're not going to do anything. And that makes us fearful of like, well, is this other payer going to scrunch down the network because I asked for something, right? What I hope people take away from this is like, don't live in fear of those contracts. You are allowed to ask the questions. If you get told no, our next step is always like, okay, well, are there certain codes we could look at with you? I really don't like that approach, mostly because I don't want to minimize our fee schedule, right? Like our fee schedule, I don't want to take away from it and then get payers thinking, oh, well, they can only operate off of this set, or like they can survive off of this, right? If you get told no on something and you're like, well, maybe I need to really go after the cranial, like a win for me would be the cranial code and I could really maximize that a little bit more. Or ask them like, hey, when can we renegotiate our contract? Like, when will you be open to this? Just continuing the conversation with them and then putting it on your calendar to reach back out to them at that time and being timely with your responses is half the battle.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe instead of just carving out a specific code, pick something you kind of specialize in your area where you feel confident that you are going to succeed there. To back up a little bit, so you start looking at your contracts individually, assessing those. When do you make the step from doing it individually to doing it as a group locally or statewide, or is there a better way to start one or the other?
If I put myself in the shoes of an independent out there, I would start with my individual one, see what ROI I could make on maybe some of my state specific ones, some smaller ones, and know that the larger ones might take a state association approach. I would say, your UHC, your Blues, those kind of things, those might be the ones where, again, we're not like colluding, but we're saying, how do we work with the payer to build our profession up in the state here?
Back to the data, I had a question around all the benefits that O&P provide in a preventatory kind of realm. Is it needed and desired when you're negotiating to bring up how much future benefit comes from this and I guess a lack of future need from the payer?
I will tell you, one of my frustrations as a clinician is that not once have we been asked about the outcomes we provide.
Really?
And the outcomes, not once has a payer asked that. And that's frustrating for me because, I fully believe in outcome measures and doing that as for the sustainability of our profession, for showing our value and those kind of things. If you are listening to this, just because a payer is not asking for it does not mean you shouldn't do it, right? It is a value to our profession and keeping what we do at the forefront for our patients, right? The outcomes show the benefit to the patient. The payers are not asking for it. However, if we work with a practice who has great outcome measures, is showing those things, we certainly build it in. They're not collecting those things. Our last slide basically kind of wraps it back up with the patient. So we have a slide deck that we use for our payer presentations. The last slide talks about how we reduce falls, we increase exercise, ambulation, how we're adding to how what we do adds to mental health benefits and those kind of things. So we do weave it back in to try and make the conversation not only about the financial aspect, but about what we're doing for the patient. The payers are responsive to it, but it is not something they're asking for, which is just odd to me. And again, I say that knowing, right, we'll just think about hip replacement surgeries. So hip replacement surgeries are now being required to provide an outcome measure of success on those surgeries. Outside of our profession, but if we're looking outside, kind of pulling in, if they're being asked that now, how do we stay ahead of that game? And so if we can start to provide outcome measures, success measures, and those kind of things, I think it'll help in the next 5 to 10 years. Just right now, it's not being asked.
Yeah, we probably all think it's obvious, but to some people, it may not be obvious, right? I mean, it's important to get a pair of good, solid inserts in a diabetic shoe to prevent any further issues. And maybe somebody doesn't know that. I'm sure they know on some level, but if you can document it and show why providing those shoes is so beneficial.
It is. And I think what we run into is, take diabetic shoes, for example. How do we prove that the outcome that was done was those shoes? Or did the patient also change their diet in the midst of all of this? How do you weave that whole story together? And with diabetic shoes and inserts, we don't get to see the patient that much after the delivery. If you are going to do this, you have to have a protocol in place for how often am I measuring or how often am I following up with the patient and what am I measuring? Even if it's a phone call, just to ask the patient, are you still happy with your devices? Has, this gone down? Have you seen any benefit? I think that would do our profession a lot of good, again, to show what we're doing and how we are reducing the risks and the comorbidities along the way. But it does take time. Going back to the start of this conversation, the margin of all of this is so small. We don't have the margin to help us focus on those non-payable efforts, right?
Yeah. And how about the technology that's out there on the EMR side? Is it proving to increase and allow people to gather this data a little bit easier?
We've got, two main players kind of in the EMR space and few kind of trying to break into the market now. One of the main players like going through a very big shift in how they're delivering their EMR services. I think they both are still working on the data capabilities. Like we've been in talks with both EMRs on just the data we're running. So what we do is we ask for reports from the EMR system to analyze it. So we put them in a dashboard of our own to look at it. And we've shared it with both the payers and saying like, if practices could look at their data this way, just from a business perspective, I think it'd be really helpful when it comes to contracts. And both of them have been open to, how they analyze that and move that forward.
Great.
Yeah, I think that would be huge.
I think they're both very invested in that. And they're invested in the outcomes part too, right? Like making sure the proper outcomes are in the systems and how those are managed. But having them in the system and then the data that comes on the back end of that. And that's the most important thing. So the practitioners are doing the work of putting it in. It's got to be very easy for us to pull it out and review it and be able to get it to the payer timely.
Well, it sounds like you guys are doing great work. I mean, if somebody wants to contact you, how do they do that?
We have a small team. I am still the owner, the salesperson, and the marketing person at this point. So
A lot of hats.
a lot of hats. So they can reach out directly to me. My email is jess@moznsolutions.com, or they can go to our website, MOZNSolutions.com, and fill out a contact form, which again, it comes directly to me. And what we'll do is we'll set up free, quick discovery call just to talk about the needs, pain points, and those kind of things, and how we can work with them to help them out on any journey that they're on, whether it be process improvement, business optimization, or our favorite insurance contracting and renegotiations.
Well, super valuable service. So thank you for providing it.
Thanks for having me. And I do encourage, and we work with, O&P Insight, CBS Billing and Consulting as well. Like we're all very invested in helping our practices that we each individually work with to conquer this problem. So it's really awesome to collaborate with others in this space to move the ball forward. And we all recognize like we can't do it alone. It's a group project and we can't fail at it this time.
Well, and all boats rise with the high tide. You guys are raising the tide.
Exactly. That's our goal. It's fun to collaborate with them. They're both great businesses. So really lucky.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us today, Jessica. This was a super interesting conversation for me, especially not knowing really anything about insurance or contracting. So I know I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you guys for having me. And thank you honestly I know it's a weird conversation to have on a podcast, right? It can kind of be like, is this something we want to get into? So thank you for allowing this space of talking about insurance contracting for our profession.
Awesome. Thank you.
To learn more about Jessica and how MOZN Solutions can help you optimize your practice, follow the link in our show notes.
Thank you for listening to the O&P Check-in, an SPS podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, be sure to leave a review and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Have a question or topic suggestion? Email us at spspodcast@spsco.com. See you next time.